Before the kitchen had a light switch, it had a damper handle. Every grandmother in Bolivar County knew exactly how far to slide it open for biscuits versus how far for a pot of greens that had to cook all afternoon. The wood stove was not an appliance. It was the center of the house, and nothing happened in the Delta until that fire was right. Number 11 on this list was only made when the preacher came to supper. Number 6 required a trip to the smokehouse before sunrise. And one dish, near the bottom of this countdown, was cooked so slowly that the family smelled it for 3 counties before it was done. These suppers vanished the same year the Rural Electrification Administration ran a wire to the door, and most of them never made it onto a recipe card. Hit subscribe because these wood stove suppers built a people, and they are worth remembering. Here are 25 old Mississippi Delta suppers cooked over a wood stove. Number 25, hot water cornbread, cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt, and a pair of hands that knew how hot was too hot. The cook poured boiling water into cornmeal and stirred until the dough held together, shaped it into flat patties with wet palms, and dropped them into a cast iron skillet with lard already popping. The wood stove had to hold a steady heat, which meant knowing the fire by sound, not by a dial. Hot water cornbread showed up when there was nothing else in the house. No eggs, no milk, no buttermilk, just meal and water. In the Mississippi Delta, this was Tuesday. It was also Wednesday. Families ate it with whatever potlikker was left from the day's greens, or with a slice of raw onion and a glass of buttermilk. Nobody called it a recipe. Nobody wrote it down. It was the meal you made when the meal before it had used up everything else. Number 24, neckbones simmered with rice. The butcher sold neckbones for almost nothing because most people did not know what to do with them. The cook in the Delta knew. She browned the bones in lard on the wood stove, added water, onion, salt, and black pepper, and let the pot work for hours until the meat pulled from the bone in soft, fatty shreds. The broth turned thick and dark with the kind of body that made the liquid cling to a spoon. Rice went into each bowl first, the neck bones on top, and the broth ladled over everything until the rice disappeared under a pool of flavor that tasted like patience and pork and nothing else. A plate of neck bones and rice was slow food in every sense, and the wood stove was the only reason it worked. No gas burner held that low, steady heat for 3 hours without scorching the bottom of the pot. Number 23, fried okra rolled in cornmeal. Okra grew faster than any other vegetable in a Delta summer, and by August there was more of it than any family could eat fresh. The cook sliced the pods into thick rounds, tossed them in cornmeal seasoned with salt and a pinch of cayenne, and fried them in a single layer in a cast iron skillet on the wood stove. The cornmeal coating went golden and crunchy while the inside stayed soft and gave up just enough of its natural thickness to hold the crust together. The trick was slicing the pods while they were dry. Wet okra turned the cornmeal into paste, and the coating slid off in the hot grease. The cook who fried okra on a wood stove had one advantage over a gas range. The heavy iron held a temperature that forgave a moment of distraction. Step away to check the greens, come back, flip the okra. Still crisp. Fried okra showed up alongside nearly every supper on this list at one point or another, and it was already on the table before anyone sat down. Number 22, guinea hen stewed with rice. Guinea fowl ran loose in Delta yards and screamed whenever a stranger came up the road, better than any watchdog and tougher than any chicken. The cook cut the bird into pieces, browned them in lard, and covered them with water, onion, and salt. The pot sat on the back of the stove for most of the afternoon because guinea meat needed time to give up its stubbornness. The broth turned dark and rich with a flavor sharper and wilder than yard chicken. When the meat finally pulled from the bone, the cook spooned it over rice and ladled the broth on top. Guinea hen was not a fancy meal. It was what happened when one of those noisy birds stopped laying and the cook decided the yard could afford to be a little quieter. Number 21, opossum slow roasted with sweet potatoes. The opossum was caught at night and penned for a week, fed nothing but sweet potatoes and table scraps to clean out the taste of whatever it had been eating in the wild. After a week, the cook killed it, scalded and scraped the hide, gutted it, and laid it in a roasting pan surrounded by halved sweet potatoes and a little water. The pan went on the wood stove with a heavy lid, and the opossum roasted low for hours until the fat rendered out and basted the sweet potatoes into something rich and golden. Opossum was a winter food tied to cold weather trapping, and families who ate it did not advertise the fact to people in town. The taste was darker and fattier than pork, closer to duck than anything that walked on four legs. The sweet potatoes absorbed so much of the rendered fat that they barely needed salt. Number 20, mudcat fried whole. A mudcat is a flathead catfish pulled from a creek or a drainage ditch, and in the Delta, they were free for anyone willing to sit on a bank with a cane pole and wait. The cook gutted it, scaled it, rolled it in seasoned cornmeal, and fried it whole in a cast iron skillet with the head still on. The wood stove held the grease at a steady temperature that no campfire could match, and that was the difference between a crisp fish and a greasy mess. Families ate around the bones, pulling the white meat off with their fingers. The head went to whoever wanted it, and somebody always did. A single large mudcat could feed a family of 6 if the cornbread held out, and the cornbread always held out. Number 19, hoe cake fried in bacon drippings. A hoe cake was cornbread cooked flat in a skillet instead of baked in a pan. Cornmeal, water, salt, and a spoonful of bacon grease saved in a tin on the back of the wood stove. The cook dropped the batter into the hot skillet and pressed it thin with the back of a spoon. Each cake fried until the edges went lace brown and the center held firm enough to pick up with bare fingers. The name came from the field hoe that workers once used as a griddle over an open fire, and by the time the wood stove arrived in the cabin, the name stuck even though the hoe was back in the shed. Hoe cakes were faster than biscuits and used less flour, which made them the default bread on nights when supper had to be on the table in minutes, not hours. Number 18, skillet fried dove with pepper gravy. Dove season in the Delta meant boys came home from the fields with a dozen small birds that barely filled a pone. The cook plucked them, split them down the breast, and fried them in bacon grease on the wood stove until the skin went tight and crisp. The meat was dark and lean and tasted nothing like chicken. After the doves came out of the skillet, the cook stirred flour into the hot grease, added milk, cracked black pepper heavy, and let the gravy thicken over low heat. The doves went back onto the plate with biscuits to soak up what was left. A single dove was barely 2 bites of meat, which meant the gravy and the biscuits were doing most of the work. Nobody said that out loud, but the cook knew it, and she made sure the gravy was good enough to carry the whole plate. Number 17, stewed rabbit with wild onions. Rabbit was not exotic in the Delta. It was pest control that happened to taste good. A boy brought one home from the field. The cook skinned it, cut it into pieces, and put it in a heavy pot on the wood stove with water, whatever wild onions grew along the field edge, a little salt, and black pepper. That pot stayed on the back of the stove for hours while the meat fell apart into the broth. The wild onions gave it a sharpness that cultivated onions never matched. Rabbit stew stretched further than any cut of pork because the broth itself was the meal. Pour it over rice or sop it with cornbread, and a single rabbit fed a table of 8. Number 16, Chitlins with hot pepper vinegar. Chitlins were the small intestines of the hog, cleaned by hand in cold water for hours until every trace of what they once carried was gone. The cleaning was the hardest part. The cook turned each piece inside out, scraped it, rinsed it, and repeated until the water ran clear. Then they went into a pot on the wood stove with onion, bay leaf, and enough water to cover. The smell during cooking divided the house. Half the family stayed in the kitchen. The other half stayed on the porch until the pot was done. When the chitlins were tender, the cook drained them, chopped them, and served them with hot pepper vinegar on the side and a wedge of cornbread underneath. Chitlins were a winter food tied to hog killing, and every family had its own opinion about whether to fry them after boiling or leave them soft. Both sides were equally certain and equally unwilling to budge. Number 15, butter beans cooked down with smoked ham hock. Butter beans were the velvet of the garden, softer than field peas and richer on the tongue. The cook shelled them on the porch and dropped them into a pot on the wood stove with a smoked ham hock, a little water, and salt. The pot stayed on low heat for the rest of the afternoon. The ham hock broke down slowly, giving up its salt and smoke into a broth that turned the beans from pale green to something closer to cream. By supper time, the butter beans had gone soft enough to mash against the roof of the mouth, and the ham hock had given everything it had. The meat that clung to the bone was a bonus. The broth was the point. Poured over rice with a piece of cornbread on the side, a pot of butter beans could stretch across 2 suppers without losing anything in the reheating. Number 14, Polk County burgoo. Burgoo in the Delta was not the horse country version from Kentucky with 10 meats and a brass trophy. It was a survival pot. The cook put whatever game and whatever vegetables were available into the biggest pot the stove could hold and let it simmer from morning until the last person came in from the field. Squirrel, possum, sweet potato, field corn, cut off the cob, a handful of dried beans soaked overnight. It all went in together. The wood stove gave burgoo what no gas range could replicate. The temperature dropped slowly as the fire died down overnight, and by morning, the liquid had thickened into something that held a spoon upright. Every pot was different. 2 houses on the same dirt road made burgoo the same week, and neither tasted like the other, because whatever walked out of the woods or grew near the fence that week determined the flavor. Nobody agreed on the right way to make it. Everybody agreed there was no wrong way. That contradiction held the whole dish together. The cook stirred the pot once in the morning and once at noon, and otherwise left it alone because burgoo punished anyone who fussed with it. Lifting the lid too often let the steam escape and thinned the broth. Stirring too hard broke the meat into threads instead of letting it hold its shape long enough to fall apart on its own terms. Patience was the only seasoning that every burgoo pot had in common. The word itself came from somewhere nobody could trace, and the dish followed the same rule. It belonged to no single recipe, no single family, no single county. It belonged to the pot and whoever was hungry enough to stand over it. Number 13, fried green tomatoes. Green tomatoes showed up in the kitchen when the vines had more fruit than they could ripen before the first cold snap. The cook sliced them thick, dredged each slice in cornmeal, and fried them in hot lard on the wood stove until the coating turned a dark gold and the tomato inside went soft and tart. The sourness of an unripe tomato against the crunch of fried cornmeal was a combination that worked so well, nobody questioned it. Fried green tomatoes were served alongside beans, rice, or whatever else was already on the plate, and they disappeared faster than anything that required an hour of cooking. The cook who timed them right, pulling each slice from the skillet, the moment the cornmeal darkened, but before the tomato collapsed, had a plate that looked like it came from somewhere finer than a shotgun house at the end of a gravel road. Number 12, fried catfish roe with onions. When the catch was a female catfish full of eggs, the cook separated the roe sacks and fried them in a skillet alongside sliced onions. The roe held together in a firm golden cake that crumbled at the edge of a fork and tasted like the river concentrated into a single bite. Seasoned with salt and black pepper and fried in the same lard that cooked everything else, the roe was a bonus that only showed up when the fish happened to be carrying. Most people who grew up away from creek banks never tasted it. Most people who grew up beside one remember it better than the catfish itself. The onions went sweet in the hot fat and softened the richness of the roe enough to eat a full plate without stopping. Number 11, smothered chicken with drop dumplings. When the preacher announced he was coming to Sunday supper, a chicken died. The cook killed it in the yard, plucked it over a pot of boiling water, cut it into pieces, and smothered it in a cast iron Dutch oven on the wood stove with onion, salt, pepper, and just enough water to make a thick gravy. When the chicken was nearly done, the cook dropped spoonfuls of a simple flour and water dough into the bubbling liquid, put the heavy lid on, and did not touch it for 15 minutes. The dumplings steamed on top of the gravy and came out pillowy and soaked through with chicken flavor. This was the meal that proved a household could feed an honored guest without shame, and the pressure to get it right was enormous. A dry dumpling or a tough bird meant something had gone wrong that no amount of sweet tea on the porch could fix. The wood stove had to hold a medium heat for the smothering and then drop to a gentle simmer for the dumplings. And making that shift without a knob meant pulling a log out of the firebox at exactly the right moment. Too much fire and the bottom scorched. Too little and the dumplings turned gummy. The cook who pulled this off with no thermostat, no timer, and no second chance had earned a reputation in the community that lasted longer than the preacher's sermon. Children were told to stay out of the kitchen entirely while the dumplings were steaming, because opening the door let in a draft that could flatten them. The next morning, whatever was left went back into the pot on low heat, and the dumplings tasted even better because they had been sitting in that gravy all night long. This was the dish that separated the cooks who understood fire from the people who just heated things up, and everyone at the table knew the difference before the first bite. Number 10, leather britches. When green beans came in heavy during the summer, freedmen's families could not eat them all before they spoiled. There was no refrigeration and no canning equipment, so the beans were threaded onto long strings using a needle and heavy thread, hung from rafters or porch ceilings, and left to dry in the open air until they shriveled into tough, leathery strips. That was how they got the name. Stored in cloth sacks, leather britches kept through the entire winter. When a family needed them, a handful was dropped into a pot of water with a piece of salt pork and simmered for hours until they rehydrated and turned tender. The flavor after that long, slow cook was deeper and more concentrated than any fresh green bean, almost smoky. Leather britches were summer preserved for winter, a bridge across the months when nothing grew. Number 9, cane syrup and butter on hot biscuits. The biscuits were baked in a cast iron skillet on the wood stove, and the syrup came from a local cane mill that pressed the juice from sugarcane stalks grown right there in the Delta bottomland. The cook kept a tin of cane syrup on the shelf year-round, and it never lasted long. For supper, she split a hot biscuit, laid a thin pat of butter inside if the cow was given, and drowned the whole thing in syrup so thick it moved like cold honey. Children could eat 4 or 5 of these and call it a full meal. Adults did the same, but said they stopped at 2. Delta cane Syrup tasted nothing like the bottle from a grocery store. It was darker, smokier, and carried a mineral bite that came straight from the black soil the cane grew in. Number 8, squirrel and dumplings. Squirrel was the most reliable game in the Delta woods, easier to find than rabbit and available year-round. A boy with a rifle or a slingshot could bring home 2 or 3 in an afternoon, and the cook had them skinned and in the pot before dark. She cut each squirrel into pieces, browned them in lard on the wood stove, covered them with water, and let the pot simmer until the meat pulled from the bone. The broth took on a flavor somewhere between dark chicken and something wilder, something that tasted like hickory bark and creek water. When the meat was done, the cook dropped spoonfuls of flour dough into the simmering liquid and clamped the lid down tight. The dumplings steamed until they puffed and turned silky on the outside. 2 squirrels and a pot of dumplings fed a family of 5, and the only cost was the afternoon a boy spent sitting against a sweet gum tree, waiting. Number 7, whole hog jowl, slow cooked with dried field peas. Hog jowl was the cheek of the pig, cured in salt and smoked over hickory in the smokehouse behind the house. The cook soaked the dried field peas overnight in a bowl of well water, put them in a heavy cast iron pot with the jowl laid on top, added water just to the level of the beans, and set the pot on the wood stove before dawn. The fire had to stay low and steady for hours, which meant somebody was feeding it split logs every hour, while the rest of the household went about the day's work. By late afternoon, the peas had absorbed the salt and smoke from the jowl, and the meat had gone so tender, it broke apart at the touch of a wooden spoon. This was a Saturday supper that took half a day and every woman in the house to finish, because someone had to mind the fire while the others did the washing and the ironing and the sweeping. The division of labor was understood without being spoken. When the pot finally came off the stove, the jowl went on a platter in the center of the table, the peas went into a serving bowl with the cooking liquid still in them, and the cornbread went on a plate next to everything. Nobody spoke for the first 5 minutes of that meal. Forks and spoons did the talking. The cook who could time a jowl and a pot of peas to finish together on a wood stove that ran on split hickory, and guesswork had done something no recipe could teach. Number 6, smokehouse sausage with stewed apples. The sausage was made during hog killing season, seasoned with sage and red pepper, stuffed into natural casings, and hung in the smokehouse until needed. A link came down when the cook called for it. She sliced it into thick rounds, fried them in a skillet on the wood stove until the casings popped and the fat rendered out, then added sliced apples from the tree near the porch and a spoonful of sugar. The apples cooked down into something soft and sweet that played against the salt and heat of the sausage. This was a fall supper that only lasted as long as the smokehouse supply and the apple tree cooperated. By midwinter, both were spent, and the memory of that combination had to carry until the next hog was killed and the next tree bore fruit. Number 5, sweet potato pone baked in the skillet. Sweet potato pone was what happened when the cook had more sweet potatoes than the family could eat roasted. She grated raw sweet potatoes by hand into a bowl, mixed the pulp with molasses, a little flour, ginger if there was any, and melted lard. The batter went into a greased cast iron skillet, the lid went on, and the skillet sat on the wood stove for an hour or more. The pone baked into a dense, dark slab that was chewy at the edges and custard soft in the center. It was not a pie and it was not a cake. It occupied its own territory, somewhere between bread and dessert, and most families ate it warm with nothing on top. Sweet potato pone needed patience and low heat, 2 things the wood stove provided better than any oven that came after it. The cook who rushed it wound up with a burned bottom and a raw middle, and everybody at the table could tell. Number 4, liver and onions fried in lard. On hog killing day, the liver came out first, and went straight to the kitchen because it would not keep. The cook sliced it thin, soaked the slices in a bowl of buttermilk to pull out the sharp mineral taste, dredged them in seasoned flour, and fried them in lard on the wood stove alongside thick rings of onion. The liver cooked fast, no more than a few minutes per side before it crossed from tender to tough. The onions took longer and went sweet and brown in the same fat. Together on a plate with rice and gravy made from the pan, drippings, liver and onions was a meal that showed up once or twice a year and split the household clean down the middle. Half the family could not get enough of it. The other half found somewhere else to be until the skillet was washed and the kitchen aired out. Number 3, raccoon stewed with turnips and onion. The raccoon was trapped or treed at night and cleaned by morning. Like opossum, it soaked in salted water to tame the gamey flavor before the cook cut it into pieces and browned it in the bottom of a heavy pot on the wood stove. Turnips and onions went in with enough water to cover, and the pot sat on low heat for most of the afternoon. The raccoon fat rendered into the turnips and turned them rich in a way that no vegetable dish could replicate on its own. By supper time, the meat was tender and the broth had gone thick and dark. Raccoon supper was country food that never crossed the line into town. People who lived within walking distance of a paved road denied eating it. People who lived beyond the pavement ate it every winter and saw no reason to apologize. Number 2, collard greens and cornbread. The collards came from the garden, picked after the first frost, turned the leaves from tough and bitter to something closer to sweet. The cook washed them 3 separate times because Delta dirt clung to every fold, stripped the thick stems by hand, and piled the leaves into the biggest pot the wood stove could hold. A smoked ham bone went in with them, along with enough water to cover the greens by an inch. That pot sat on the stove for 3 or 4 hours, the leaves shrinking down into a dark, silky mass that tasted nothing like the raw leaf it started as. The cornbread baked in a separate skillet on the same stove at the same time. Every family in the Delta ate this supper, and every family insisted theirs was different from the house next door. The difference was real. One cook added a splash of vinegar near the end. Another dropped in a whole dried pepper. Another added nothing at all and let the ham bone do the talking. Number 1, the plate with no recipe. This is not a single dish. This is every supper made from whatever was left. A piece of salt pork, a handful of field peas, a few sweet potatoes from the cellar, an onion starting to go soft, a cup of cornmeal. Whatever the house had, the cook turned into something that held together on a plate. There was no name for it because it was different every night. There was no recipe because the ingredients were never the same twice, but the plate showed up. Every evening on every wood stove, in every shotgun house and sharecropper cabin across the Mississippi Delta, someone stood over that fire and made something from almost nothing. Not a particular dish, not a name technique, the refusal to let a family go hungry night after night, year after year, in a place that gave them almost nothing to work with. Every supper on this list grew out of that refusal. The wood stove just gave it somewhere to happen.
Fried pork chops with apples was the kind of dinner that felt hearty and homelike even when money was tight. The pork chops were coated lightly or simply seasoned, then fried until golden brown, sending up smells that wrapped themselves around the walls and furniture. Apples were sliced thin and cooked down until they softened into a warm, sweet topping that balanced the savory richness of the meat. It was a pairing that felt natural, almost inevitable, like something families had been making long before recipes were written down. Adults loved how filling it was. Kids loved the sweetness of the apples, and everyone loved how it turned an ordinary night into something comforting. It was the type of dish you remembered without even trying to remember it. It filled the house, filled the plate, and filled the moment with a kind of steady warmth only the 1960s kitchen could produce. Cranberry sauce, made from whole berries and sugar water, provided the traditional tart-sweet condiment without spending money on canned versions that cost 3 times more. Black mothers would buy fresh cranberries when they appeared seasonally in grocery stores, usually paying less than $1 for a pound that made enough sauce for 20 people. The berries were simmered with sugar and water until they burst and thickened into glossy, ruby-red sauce that tasted fresher and brighter than anything from cans. Some women added orange zest when citrus was affordable, while others kept it simple with just berries, sugar, and patience. The sauce could be made days ahead and actually improved with time as flavors melded, making it perfect for busy Thanksgiving preparations. Children loved the sweet tart flavor that contrasted with rich, savory dishes, while adults appreciated the burst of color and acidity that balanced heavy meals.
Fried rabbit pieces were country cooking at its finest, turning wild game or backyard hutch rabbits into crispy, tender meals rivaling any fried chicken. The rabbit was jointed, soaked in buttermilk to tenderize the lean meat, then dredged in seasoned flour and fried until golden brown with a crust that crackled with every bite. The meat inside stayed moist and mild, taking on seasoning flavors while maintaining delicate texture distinguishing it from poultry. Rural families raised rabbits for frying because they reproduced quickly and required little space or feed. Children learned to help with preparation, understanding where food came from and respecting animals that sustained them. Fried rabbit was often served at special gatherings, considered more refined than everyday fare. It represented self-sufficiency. Applying mayonnaise to remove water stains from wooden furniture was an African-American remedy that furniture experts now endorse. Grandmothers would spread mayonnaise over white rings left by wet glasses, cover with cloth, and let it sit overnight, revealing restored wood by morning. Food scientists understand that mayonnaise's combination of oil and vinegar penetrates wood grain, rehydrating dried fibers, while mild acid dissolves mineral deposits. This technique saved countless tables from permanent damage without expensive refinishing. The hack required only pantry staples and patience, making it accessible to any household. Women passed this knowledge through generations, rescuing precious furniture that represented significant family investments.
Cream chip potatoes were a full dinner disguised as a side dish, something families made when the pantry was nearly empty, but the expectation of a warm meal still stood. Potatoes were sliced, boiled until just soft, then folded into a simple cream sauce that turned everything silky and comforting. It was not flashy or colorful, but it was filling, warm, and dependable. The sauce coated every piece, turning the dish into a milky, tender scoop of pure comfort that tasted far richer than its ingredients suggested. Families served it on its own or with a biscuit or two, letting the potatoes carry the whole meal. Kids often underestimated it until they took a bite, only to realize how satisfying it was. Adults relied on it because it stretched ingredients beautifully. Even today, the memory of those creamy potatoes lingers because it was the kind of food that kept people going with nothing more than simplicity and care. Buttermilk biscuits served with sorghum syrup became the dessert alternative when pies and cakes felt too expensive, turning breakfast bread into sweet treat that satisfied cravings. Black mothers would make extra biscuits specifically for serving with syrup after dinner, knowing that warm bread with sweet topping could substitute for fancy desserts. Sorghum syrup was cheaper than honey or maple syrup, providing dark, complex sweetness that paired beautifully with buttery biscuits. Children loved this simple dessert because they could eat with their hands, breaking open hot biscuits and drizzling syrup into every layer. Adults appreciated how leftover biscuits from dinner could be repurposed into dessert without additional cooking. This wasn't elegant or sophisticated, but it provided that sense of completion that dessert offered. Biscuits with syrup proved that satisfaction came from simplicity rather than complexity.
Fried pork chop sandwiches were working-class treasures that fueled laborers through long days in factories and fields. Thin-cut pork chops were pounded flat, seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic, then dredged in flour and fried until edges turned crispy while meat stayed juicy. Slapped between soft white bread with mustard and pickles, these sandwiches traveled well and satisfied hunger like few other meals. Families made them early mornings, wrapping them in wax paper for husbands heading to work before dawn. The pork chops were affordable cuts that stretched when fried thin and served between bread. Children received smaller versions as treats, learning good food required no expensive ingredients. These sandwiches represented honest labor and care families put into keeping workers fed. Storing bread with celery stalks to maintain freshness was an African-American pantry trick that produced remarkable results in households across the country. Grandmothers would place a stalk or two inside bread boxes and storage bags, somehow extending the loaf's softness by several days beyond what seemed possible. Modern food scientists now understand that celery releases moisture at a rate that perfectly balances bread's tendency to dry out without promoting mold growth. The celery sacrificed itself, becoming dry while the bread stayed fresh. This technique was valuable in households where bread was baked weekly and needed to last between baking days. Women traded this knowledge at church gatherings, perfecting the ratio through shared experience.
Macaroni and stewed tomatoes was a surprisingly tangy, humble dish that stretched every ingredient just a little further, making it a popular staple in the 1960s kitchen. Elbow macaroni boiled until tender was mixed with tomatoes stewed down until they turned soft and slightly sweet, creating a flavor that was simple yet strangely satisfying. It did not pretend to be anything fancy. It was a dish for busy parents, hungry kids, and anyone needing comfort without cost. The tang from the tomatoes mixed with the soft macaroni in a way that stuck in your memory long after childhood passed. Some families topped it with a bit of cheese, some kept it plain, but either way, it tasted warm and familiar, like a weeknight that ended well. It was a dish defined not by extravagance but by reliability, something people still crave because it feels like stepping back into a kitchen where everything was steady and safe. Carrot and raisin salad made with minimal mayonnaise became the sweet, crunchy side dish that added color and nutrition without requiring cooking or expensive ingredients. Black mothers would buy carrots by the bag when on sale, shredding them by hand or with graters borrowed from neighbors, then mixing them with raisins that provided natural sweetness. The mayonnaise was used sparingly, just enough to coat everything, while lemon juice or vinegar added brightness. This cold salad was perfect for crowded refrigerators since it took up little space and actually tasted better after sitting overnight. Children loved the sweetness from raisins and the satisfying crunch of fresh carrots, making it one of the few vegetable dishes that didn't require cajoling. Adults appreciated its versatility, serving it as side dish, light dessert, or even breakfast the next morning. Carrot and raisin salad proved that simple combinations of affordable ingredients could create dishes that delighted across generations.
Fried sweet potato pies were portable treasures that turned holiday flavors into handheld treats perfect for church socials. Cooks prepared spiced sweet potato filling, tucked it inside rounds of homemade dough, then sealed the edges before lowering them into hot oil. The crust fried golden and flaky while filling stayed warm and creamy, creating packages of comfort eaten without plates or forks. These hand pies appeared at revivals, picnics, and homecomings where food needed to travel well. The filling used beloved spices, including cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla that perfumed the air. Children loved these because they could eat while playing without returning to the table. Fried sweet potato pies was celebration food made practical, bringing holiday warmth to everyday occasions.
Fish sticks and crinkle-cut fries were the kind of dinner kids begged for. the unofficial meal of busy weeknights when the adults were too tired to fuss. The moment that frozen box hit the counter, excitement followed, because everyone knew dinner would be fast and crispy, and exactly the kind of food children believed counted as a celebration. The fish sticks went into the oven in neat rows, sizzling as the breading crisped while the fries baked beside them, each crinkle catching just enough salt to make them addictive. It was not fancy seafood, not even close, but to a child it tasted like the best thing the freezer aisle had ever made. There was comfort in the uniformity, the predictability, the way dipping sauces always turned the plate into a tiny adventure. Adults liked it because it filled everyone up without much effort. Kids loved it because it tasted like freedom and fun. Even now, biting into a fish stick can take you straight back to a living room floor covered in toys, a television playing too loudly, and a plate balanced on your knees. It was cheap, easy, and unforgettable. Chicken quarters baked instead of turkey gave families affordable poultry that still felt special, allowing Black mothers to serve bird on Thanksgiving without spending $20 on turkey. Leg quarters sold for less than 50 cents per pound in the 1970s, and when bought in bulk bags, they became even more economical. Mothers seasoned them heavily with paprika, garlic powder, black pepper, and whatever herbs the cabinet held, then baked them slowly until the skin crisped golden and the meat stayed tender. The dark meat remained moist even with extended cooking, making them more forgiving than turkey breast. A 10-pound bag of chicken quarters could feed 20 people when accompanied by generous sides. The drippings collected in baking pans became bases for gravy, ensuring nothing went to waste. Children actually preferred chicken to turkey because it was familiar and easier to eat. Baked chicken quarters taught families that tradition could be adapted.
Placing a wooden spoon across boiling pots to prevent overflow was a technique every African American grandmother seemed to know instinctively. When pasta water or milk threatened to bubble over, laying a wooden spoon across the pot's rim would mysteriously calm the foam. Food scientists have since explained that wood's dry surface destabilizes bubbles on contact, while the spoon's temperature causes rapid bubble collapse. This hack saved countless stovetops from sticky messes and allowed multitasking cooks to attend other duties without constant watching. Grandmothers would position their spoons and turn to other tasks, confident their pots would behave. Children watched this seeming magic and learned that traditional knowledge often outpaced scientific understanding. Fried croaker fish were beloved staples at fish fries throughout African American communities along rivers and coastlines. Named for the sound they made when caught, these fish were cleaned, scored, seasoned, then dredged in cornmeal before hitting hot oil. The skin fried into a crackling crust while white flesh inside stayed flaky and moist, falling easily from the bone. Families gathered at community fish fries where croakers sizzled in large outdoor fryers, the smell drawing neighbors from blocks away. The fish was served on newspaper with hot sauce, white bread, and coleslaw. Children learned to eat around bones carefully, developing skills that served them at many future fish fries. Fried croaker represented community gathering and celebration.
Corned beef hash with a fried egg was the kind of hearty skillet meal families leaned on when they needed something filling that cooked fast. Corned beef crisped in the pan alongside diced potatoes, onions, and peppers until everything browned together in a savory, sizzling mixture. Then came the fried egg, placed on top with a soft, golden center that spilled gently into the hash with the first cut of a fork. The smell filled the house, earthy and rich, waking up appetites instantly. Kids liked mixing the egg into the potatoes, turning the whole plate into a warm, comforting mess. Adults liked how far a single can of corned beef could stretch. It was practical, reliable, and deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that kept everyone full and content. Even now, people crave that combination of crispy edges, soft potatoes, and rich egg because it tasted like weekend mornings, family chatter, and the simple goodness of skillet cooking. Dinner plates assembled strategically with small portions of many dishes created the visual abundance that made Thanksgiving feel special even when individual items were simple. Black mothers understood that perception mattered as much as reality, so they arranged plates with care to ensure everything looked generous. A tablespoon of each side dish, when presented attractively, made plates look full and varied despite containing less food than traditional servings. This wasn't deprivation, but intelligent portioning that ensured 20 people could eat from supplies that might normally serve 12. The variety itself provided satisfaction, as diners experienced multiple flavors even though amounts were modest. Children didn't notice smaller portions when their plates held 7 or 8 different items. Strategic plating represented the invisible labor that Black mothers performed to create holiday magic from limited means.
25 suppers, and not one of them came with a dial, a timer, or a temperature setting. A kitchen is just a room until somebody lights a fire in it. In the Delta, that fire burned from before dawn until the last dish was dried and put away, and the person who kept it going rarely sat down to eat first. Try making hot water cornbread from number 25, or fry a round of smokehouse sausage with stewed apples from number 6, or simmer a pot of butter beans from number 15 this week. See what comes back to you. Drop the dish your family cooked into gold in the comments, the one that tasted different when your grandmother was the one standing at the stove. Share this with somebody who still remembers what a kitchen smelled like before the gas company ran a line to the door.